First of all, thank you all for coming, and for those of you that are repeat visitors, thank you for coming back. This is our second public engagement meeting on the future of Audubon Tennis. I'm Rebecca Dietz. I'm the Executive Vice President of Public Affairs for Audubon Nature Institute. This process grew out of the Audubon Park Master Plan, which wrapped up about 1.5 years ago, and we realized that Audubon Tennis was such an important topic to a lot of people that we wanted to give the topic its own set of public meetings. The opportunity for tennis players, users, community members, neighbors, stakeholders, everyone who has an interest in Audubon Tennis to be able to provide their feedback. So our first meeting last week was just that. We had an opportunity for everyone to come to the mic, give us your comments on how you'd like to see the tennis courts improve, stay the same, increase programming, decrease programming, whatever you felt we wanted to hear it. And the same goes for tonight, with one caveat. For those of you that we heard from last week, we'd love it if you'd give the new people an opportunity to speak first. If you have something new to say that you didn't say last week, we welcome that comment. But if you want to reiterate what you said last week, we'd appreciate it if you'd wait and give other people the opportunity to be heard first. I'm going to allow the people at the table to introduce themselves, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mark Ripple, who's our facilitator tonight, and he is going to walk us through the process for both comment and then breakout sessions. So thank you. We'll start over here with Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Marshall. I'm the Vice President and Managing Director of Uptown Facilities for Audubon.
Mark Ripple with SQ Dumas Ripple Architects in New Orleans.
Beth Lambert with the Audubon Commission.
Okay, thanks. It looks like it's going to be another great turnout. We've got folks continuing to come in. Show of hands, how many people were not at last week's meeting? Raise your hand. Great. Okay. And just a housekeeping thing, they know about the card? Did they receive cards coming in? Okay, so the way we're going to do a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of a background, just to remind folks that we're here last week, but also to let the new folks know how this works. But if you're interested in making a comment, there are blank cards available, and there's Shaman is walking around. Just wave if you'd like to make a comment and fill in the cards. So as I said, my name is Mark Ripple. I'm a principal at SQ Dumas Ripple Architects here in New Orleans. We had the opportunity last year at this time, I guess it was about 1.5 years ago, to work with the Audubon Institute and more importantly with a large number of folks in the community on the Audubon Park Master Plan. I have two of my colleagues here with me today that are going to be helping with the breakout sessions. Over here we have Tracy, and at the other side of the room we have Amanda. You may remember Amanda from last week, and Tracy and Amanda were both involved in the master planning work for the Audubon Institute. So we just wanted to go through, just give you a little bit of a background as to where we've been and to put this tennis conversation in a slightly larger context. So as we said, you can see on the screen, I think it was last May, it's been about 15, 16 months, 18 months since we wrapped up the master planning work. Our firm, SQ Dumas Ripple, led the planning effort to help sort of coalesce a larger vision for the Audubon Institute, specifically for the park. We had pulled in a number of notable consultants, landscape architects, traffic planners, and a digital communications expert to help facilitate those efforts. At its core, it involved extensive, robust community engagement. The Audubon Institute is here to serve the community, and the best way to understand what the community needs, what they want, what their desire, what their vision is to listen and listen carefully. We like to do that in a very engaging way, which is to have you here and listen to you speak and have breakout sessions like we're going to have tonight. But also there are a lot of people that work, or that families or work prevents them from coming. Audubon has initiated a very strong program on their website at any point in time. It's structured in a way to where you can weigh in, your neighbors can weigh in, your friends that couldn't attend tonight can weigh in. We listen. We just got the first batch of comments today that our team reviewed. It's extremely important to spread the word that if somebody can't make the meetings, please ask them to weigh in with their comments and their thoughts on the matter. Because we want to hear individual voices, but as we're trying to develop a collective vision, it is important to know if 100 people are saying, if one person says something, every comment's important. If 100 people are saying the exact same thing, obviously that's the first step in creating sort of a collective vision. Last week we were here entirely to listen, just to give folks the opportunity to stand up at the mic or fill in a card. If you're not comfortable speaking, just fill in the card and I'll read the comment. But this is a combination of continuing to listen but also to engage a bit. But the ultimate goal is to be able to coalesce these ideas. There have been a number of questions last week about, well, what about money? What about this? What about that? The first thing we need to do is to understand what is the greater desire of the community. The next steps would be then to figure out what are the practical issues, what are the pros and cons of getting it done, what are the costs, and ultimately what is the best way to collectively to be able to implement the kind of changes that have been agreed to. So that's the way the process works, and we're here on part 2 to listen and to engage. So just to familiarize, just to orient you, maybe some of you are not used to looking at it as people, not as planners from an aerial view. Where's the highlight here? Oh. Uh-oh. Now I've done it. Oh, geez. Yeah, I'm looking. Where's the point? So we had one that had a pointer before. Did I lose that? So as you're looking at the image on the screen, the vertical line that's splitting right down the middle is Magazine Street. So Amanda can get up there and wave. No, that's all right, Amanda. The vertical line right down the middle is Magazine Street. On the left, the bluish cast is the Mississippi River. On the far right, at the far right of the screen, is St. Charles Avenue, and there we go. And the bottom piece of the screen is Exposition Boulevard.
That's the laser pointer.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so Magazine Street, Exposition Boulevard, St. Charles Avenue. There's the fly and the soccer fields. Of course, what we're here to discuss is the tennis courts, which are right there, baseball field. If this continued, you would see Children's Hospital down here further downriver. So as we zoom in on the tennis courts themselves, this is the layout. And again, if you're coming down Chapatoulas, Magazine Street's over here, the river is over on this side. Coming down Chapatoulas, you've got the parking lot right here. This is Calhoun. You come into the parking lot and 5 clusters of 2 tennis courts each. So you've got 10 tennis courts. You have the tennis clubhouse in the center. You have the baseball diamond is over here. And then under the trees, there's additional parking here. And again, just as orientation, Children's Hospital, obviously in the middle of a significant construction expansion. The all-important immediately adjoining neighborhood, immediately across Chapatoulas, and then the park and the zoo. So what we heard, going back to the master planning, is a collection of things. In general, what we heard with the master plan is we don't want a lot more programs. Some people, a couple notable exceptions, they said we like the programming that we've got. We really just want to make what we've got better. We heard something decidedly different from the tennis folks during the master planning. It was a very healthy attendance. It's obvious that the folks that use the tennis courts are extremely passionate, and probably most of you here today fit that group. And what we heard is that there's incredible opportunity here to be able to do what we're doing better. And that's why we're here tonight, is to talk about that specifically. Perhaps in my personal take as I listened to the master planning, the only thing that got maybe a tad bit of pushback was the idea, this is going back to the master planning, was the idea of night lighting because of the possibility that the neighborhood may be pushing back. But that was a very minor viewpoint. The majority of the comments that we got were in favor of tennis, the popularity of it, the success. Last week, what we heard a lot of was how well so proud of Audubon Institute and the way in which the courts are being maintained, but that there are opportunities to continue to do better. So that was, in general, I think, the comments that we heard. So at this point, what we want to do is the same thing that we did last week. The opportunity for folks that have not had the chance to speak to fill out a card and bring Shemin is bringing the cards up, and we'll ask that each of you come on up and speak. Just out of respect for our neighbors, please limit the comments to 2 minutes, and we'll start from here. Okay, first up, Mike McNulty.
Well, I live about 15 blocks from here. I'm a resident of New Orleans about the last 3 years. I retired here, and after retiring, I'm a full-time supporter of tennis. I'm involved with the United States Tennis Association, and we have a gym here at Audubon. We have a...
Oh. Yeah, if you could turn, just face the
face
mic.
this way?
No, face the mic up a little bit. Speak into the mic.
Oh, I'm
Sounds
sorry.
like it's working okay.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
So I played tennis since I was a kid. The family that I grew up in is the USTA Family Tennis Family of the Year. Tennis is an incredible sport. It's the only sport where a 12-year-old plays a 65-year-old. So when you're out at Audubon and you're looking at the soccer fields, you don't see 65-year-old men like me. What tennis allows is to be able to serve the population of New Orleans. I can give all the statistics and tell you, but the healthiest sport that you can play to live a longer life and to be happy is tennis. From the Mayo clinics to the international studies, 17 clinics have concluded that. So I want to play tennis and I want to live 7.8 years longer. And I want everybody in this room to do that. And I want the citizens of New Orleans to do that. And I want all of you to be able to play with your children and to play with your grandchildren like I do. It's about serving the community. And as I said, and the first few words I said was, this is a gym. I travel around the country and I go to tennis facilities, and everything I hear is, we need to build the facilities. How are we going to raise the money to be able to serve our population? We already have that. What we need to do is we need to be able to engage. We need to be able to put our citizens on those courts. We do that now. We certainly do. But we have so many more opportunities to do that. We have a portion of the USTA, and our mission is to promote and to grow the game of tennis. We're presently involved in over 2,000 developments of facilities. We can provide all of the architectural plans. We can provide all of the construction plans. If you're looking at lighting, and I heard that, we can give you all of the lighting stats where you can be 90 feet away and not even know that there is lighting 90 feet away. We can build those observation decks and give you those plans for free. We can give you the parking because we've done it. I just spent the last week at our community office in Orlando, Florida, a 104-court facility. When we played tennis, we had an observation deck that it would suit the needs of Audubon and provide a great service for our citizens. The question that we have is just, how much do we want to engage? Do we want this to be a facility where the neighbors play tennis? Or we want to monetize this? And do we want to bring in tournaments? Because I can tell you, I've served on tournament selection committees at the national, the sectional, and the local level. And when you say New Orleans, you're going to get that tournament. If you look at the facilities, as nice as the facilities are that Chris Barb maintains, you're going to get that facility. You'll be able to monetize it. Do you want to reach out to the schools and have after-school programs and bring the kids from the neighborhoods here or farther to Audubon and play tennis? You can do it because we have the best practices and we have the marketing to be able to do that. We have what's called Net Generation, and you've probably heard of the New Orleans Metropolitan Tennis Association that facilitates that. So in my mind, it's just a question of how much you want to do. We can fill those courts, and we can have this be the premier facility in New Orleans.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, next up, Daniel Legrand.
Good evening. I'm Daniel Legrand. I use Audubon Park as my tennis home. I play no less than 50 times and maybe as much as 75, 80 times a year at the park. I wanted to impress upon Audubon the importance, how clay courts are essential. I'm 56, I'm in great health, but I can tell you that if we don't have clay courts to play on at Audubon, it will not be my home anymore because it's just too tough on the body to play tennis as much as I love to play it on hard courts. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And that is something we've heard consistently last week, as well as we've gotten a number of comments that we had reviewed that were made online. And that is certainly a consistent element throughout, is keeping the importance of the clay courts because of the strain on your body, particularly folks, the older folks. Okay, more comments? All right. Oh, okay, come on up.
Oh,
And-
yeah, I'm next, she told me.
Yes.
My name is Lexi Butler, and I've been playing at the Audubon courts for about 10 years now. They're wonderful courts. Chris has done an amazing job with the facility. I wasn't here last week, so I hope I'm not saying anything redundant. But the big problem for me and most of my friends that play tennis is there's no lights. We all live in the neighborhood. We work. We have families. So really the only time we can play is after work, when it's dark, or on the weekends. And so what happens is we end up having to join USTA teams out of City Park or maybe Stern and drive all the way across the city just so that we can play. I want to stay in the neighborhood. I want to support the facility that I love to play at, and that's just not an option right now. We've been working on this issue for probably 8 years. We've talked to various people, different people with Audubon, and it just seems like that's not going anywhere. We've been told that there's neighborhood opposition, but many of us live in the neighborhood, including someone who lives 2 houses down, and I'm not aware of anyone who cares, particularly because Children's has massive lights. The baseball field has massive lights, so I can't imagine that adding a few small lights would cause a problem. But I love the facility, and thank you for hearing us out tonight.
Certainly. Thank you, Lexi. Okay. And please don't be shy. I saw a lot of hands, a lot of new folks. So if you've got something to say, please sign up. Lewis. All right. Thanks, Lewis.
I just want to add one thing. Y'all mentioned that you had been talking to Tulane when we met last week. And just out of curiosity, I did some research and went online to look at Tulane's tennis team. They have, on both the men's and women's team, they have 17 players. None of them live in Orleans Parish. None of them live in the state of Louisiana. The idea that Tulane might consider taking over some of these courts and making them hard courts to the detriment of the local population that supports this park is just would seem inconceivable. So just wanted to add that.
Okay. Thank you, Lewis. Okay. Up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tiki McIntyre, and we've met at some of the other meetings, but I am here because I'm a mommy, and my daughter, Ryan, is a little embarrassed. She's like, don't make me speak. Anyway, so Ryan and Hattie have been playing tennis for 2 years now, and Hattie's 7, Ryan is 10, and we love coming over here because we live on Chapatulas, right across from Children's Hospital by the brick wall. So for us, it's really simple to get in the car. We can walk down, but most of the time we drive. But you know, we could, and if we all could ride bikes consistently, once Hattie gets up to speed on her bike, we'll be able to ride bikes down there. But you know, for us, it's amazing. If we could have lights at night, that would really extend our playtime, especially in the wintertime. And New Orleans is ripe for lights at night because the weather's perfect. But also the clay courts are amazing. And I am not 25 anymore. But, and it's important to have the clay courts for, I don't know if do you play tennis?
Many, many years ago. I played in college, but
Yeah.
not since then.
So anyway, I like clay courts. And I like the staff. The staff at Audubon's amazing. But anyway, that's really it. But I will say this, our team, our junior tennis team, the 10 and unders, went to sectionals this past year. Where's Mike? Where'd he go? I can't see. My glasses need to be clean. Anyway, and we practiced a lot of early mornings over there at Audubon as our little team was preparing to go to sectionals, and they did pretty well. But they had fun, and I think it is a lifelong sport, and that's why we're doing it, because we are playing on the courts with our 7 and 10-year-olds, my husband and I, and it's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Okay. Opening it up to anybody that commented last week then that has something new that they forgot to comment on. Any other thoughts? Any comments before we? Yes, come on up.
I'm not going to come up. I brought about 7 people to say exactly what's been said. Support the lights, support the clay courts. We don't want to get redundant, but...
Got you.
We all live in the neighborhood of the 5 blocks.
Okay. Yes, Tiki. That's great to hear.
I mean, I'm on the board. I would have heard about it, and so I haven't heard anybody like screaming and yelling. Yeah, there's the fear that Mike talked about, and if you can show the studies, maybe with the lighting can be kind lighting. I think everything in life should be kind. You know, we should just
Right.
be kind to our neighbors.
Well, and as was discussed last week, the lighting technology is such that light bleed can be extremely, it can be controlled much more precisely than 10 or 20 years ago. And one of the reasons Tracy Lee, my colleague of 25 years, is here, he also lives in addition to being a principal at our firm, he's lived on Henry Clay for what, 20 years? 25 years, and been involved in ARNA and the neighborhood associations. So we did want to make sure that, as we had mentioned, there was minor comments earlier on in the master planning, but the support of tennis in the last meeting was 100% universal. So we have not yet heard either in the public meetings to date or in any of the commentary that we've gotten digitally that says otherwise. So it's been a very consistent message regarding tennis. Okay, yes. Yes.
being the defender of Tulane, it seems to me that people have made it very evident that there's enough demand for, adding 6 more courts, 8 more courts, and that there would be a payback. So I don't get the conflict. Why wouldn't we consider the solution to be leave the 10 courts alone? I mean, you might move them and add additional courts if you happen to invite other people who want lights and hard courts in. There might be a constraint on space, but you're an architect. I'm sure you have creative ideas about this, okay? The other thing I need to say, just as a side thing in defense of Tulane, there are a large number of people who make their revenue of Tulane, including the gentleman who came and spoke right now and said that they don't belong. I don't understand why it can't be more cooperative.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, come on up. And state your name, please, when you get to the mic. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mel Gold, and I just want to say I haven't heard this from anyone yet, and someone may have said it earlier or the last time. But one major reason to add lights is, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's getting hotter. And if you believe in global warming, as I do, it's going to continue to get hotter. It's going to continue to get hotter to where the evening time is going to be the best time for people to be able to play a sport that makes you run and lose electrolytes and water, and can be, especially on older people, fairly dangerous. So that would be a good reason, again, to have lighted courts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, come on up. Yes.
A lot of people have said wonderful things about the courts here, and they are wonderful. I've played at the city park several times, and even their soft courts there do not measure up to what we have. That's right.
That's great to hear.
And I've slipped on their courts. These courts are just the best in the city, and I think we need to keep them.
Well said. And we did hear that quite a bit last week and in the digital surveys. The quality of the courts and the facilities here are outstanding. Okay, any final comments before we move on to the next step? We did want to, just for those of you that have forgotten what everything looks like there's your clubhouse, and Amanda went into, Amanda, is that the men's room or the ladies' room? Amanda went into both bathrooms, because apparently, as we heard last week, sometimes, the women use the men's room because they need to, because it's available. So the clubhouse, the areas, modest in terms of square footage, but at least from what we've seen and heard, well-maintained. Parking areas that are both formal areas and the areas back on the park side under the trees. There were comments about with the fencing, particularly as it adjoining the baseball area, and concern about the balls, getting hit in the head by a baseball. And let's see, anything in particular, Amanda, that we ought to point out? Right, so available parking, informal parking, as we say. Audubon, one of the things that did come out of the master planning was very clearly a consensus about limiting the ability to park underneath the oak trees because of the sensitivity to the roots of the oak trees. I think for the most part, Audubon has fully protected the oak trees, and certainly one of the master plan recommendations is if there are areas that are not protected, that they need to be. The oak trees are an amazing, amazing resource. So, but that was one of the things that came out in the master planning discussion about what might be possible there. Okay, so next step then, we have 2 little exercises. Yes? I'm not sure, let me, okay. Tracy, any idea what that is? Entergy, okay.
Yeah,
Got
the
it.
information we have is that's a decommissioned transformer. Is that that right, Carmen? Something that one of the utilities is bringing out? Yeah.
Okay.
That it was a vault, a sunken vault, and it's decommissioned and coming out.
Okay. Okay, any final comments, questions before we move on? Okay, we're going to do two things. The first thing we're going to do, when you arrived, you should have 3 dots. Does everybody have 3 dots? If not, raise your hand and we can get folks some dots. So they're color-coded. There's a number on each. Red is 1, blue is 2, green is 3. What we did was, in the note-taking from last week, we have 4 poster boards on the wall that have some photos just to help you remind you of what we're looking at and what we're talking about. And we just basically put down a whole bunch of comments that we heard last week, things that you liked, things you were concerned about, big ideas, little ideas, whatever it is that you think is important. What we'd like you to do, it's just going to be a quick exercise, take your dots and put a dot. Number 1 means the thing that you care the most about, or that you'd worried the most about, the thing you'd like to change the most, but for you is the most pressing either priority or opportunity. So number 1 is your best, your best number 1 thing. Number 2 and number 3 then from there. So you can stretch your legs, go on up there, put up your dot. Let's do this in about 2 or 3 minutes and come on back down and have a seat. Oh, and if you see something, if you have something that is not on the wall, we have pens available. Write down, add something to the list.
So, while Witch Frank goes in here, I have pneumonia for September. And I mean, I'm telling you, it's just left. Yes. So I went back one time since the break, and I got sick.
That's been it.
This geographically moved this down here. Moved this
Who do you think? No, I think that's just 2 dots.
Oh, we can put that up here, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
Be somewhere here. Because all
See,
this is,
I'm okay with
all
parking
of this.
farther away because
but that's good.
You have to park here now. You park there.
It's pretty clear what the priorities are. They speak for themselves. If we just should have put big letters on the, maintaining the clay courts and the night lighting, because there were so many dots there, they were spilling into the next line. So Amanda, you're up there. So we've got, obviously the top 2 are the maintaining the courts, clay courts, the clay courts and the night lighting. What would be number 3 in terms of voting? Upgrading restrooms and locker rooms, but that was a distant third. Yes, when you, yes, just right, exactly. Okay, so it's pretty clear what the priorities are, and the nice thing is the priorities are pretty focused and consistent with what we've been hearing over the last week. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to have Tracy is going to be going to the table nearest the men's room. We have 3 tables. Think of this as good, better, and best. Tracy's going to go to the most remote table, closest to the men's room, under the light. And anybody that's interested, we're going to do breakout sessions. People that are interested in talking about grand ideas, the big, as Ron Foreman says many times, where is the big idea, the big thought? The folks that are thinking expansively about what might be, and not limited to just, well, what can we do today or tomorrow, or what about the money? If you're interested in just discussing big visions, whether it be for the facility, whether it be for programming of the tennis facility, we've heard a lot about that over the last week. Go to that table, and we're going to do a collection of folks there that we can brainstorm about what big ideas look like. And Tracy is going to, for our staff, and there'll be Audubon staff there as well. So that's the table furthest away, closest to the men's room. The middle table I'll be helping facilitate. That's the middle of the roaders, the folks that, well, okay, I don't want to sell, the idea is short, but I also realize that we don't have all the time and all the money, and maybe there are constraints. So that's the middle of the road. The folks that are thinking about a more modest vision of what might be, okay, I kind of like the way things are, and I just have a couple little things that I think need to improve. So it's a little different way than we've done this before, but we're curious to see if it works. It's the first time that we've done one like this. And if you get kind of tired or bored with a group, it's no problem to go after, a few minutes to move over and see what the big vision folks are thinking, or vice versa. So we want to do this for 5 to 10 minutes. We'll see how it unfolds, and we'll gather up everybody after it's done. Thanks. Lights are not an issue.
I mean, the parking lot right here is like a ship. It looks like a cruise ship.
Right, and it does help that, again, that, there is already a lot of lighting, as we've heard elsewhere, and there is a little bit of a distance here, so I'm expert, but I can imagine you could focus lights pretty effectively on the tennis courts and not.
Yes. Absolutely. When your friends are playing, you can watch them above.
But maybe, this is the thing,
No, way.
50 by the size of the stair, which 50.
Do you want a restaurant?
The one at Youngsville.
why are they open? There's no one.
So the benefit of that is, well, what that leads to.
And then Mark's going to wrap it up, and I'll wrap it up on behalf of Audubon. Thank you again for being here. It's a cold, wet night, and we just really appreciate all your input. All right. I don't want to call out Mr. McNulty by name, but it's probably time for him to come on back. All right, we're going to report out on each of the tables quickly, and then summarize the evening. Thank y'all again. All right.
No, you go.
Okay, I'm going to report out for the small table. Our group was fairly small. It was myself, Shimin, and Daniel. 3 people at our table. So we were pretty much okay with the status quo and how everything was. We thought parking was okay. Proximity is not an issue. If you have to walk a little bit to get to your court, it's okay. You will be playing tennis afterwards once you get to the courts. The clubhouse, we did acknowledge that the bathrooms could be better. Maybe just a little bit of paint in the restrooms, and of course add a ladies' stall. That would be nice. A social room would also be nice if we could reallocate space for that. And we were not interested in online reservations for courts. It was just not necessary for our table. As far as the courts go, we did realize that the baseball field proximity does present some issues. We didn't really talk about solutions for these, but foul balls are absolutely an issue, even with the extended netting that's been provided, and the music can be loud at times. So those were our main issues that we discussed. Thank you.
Okay, so for table number 2, we had a very healthy discussion, a lot of different input. I guess we had 10 or 12 people consistently there discussing. There was a lot of pushback on Avenger Field. We did briefly had Mr. Foreman did step in and just ask the obvious question, is there any possibility that Avenger Field might go away? And I think the answer there is no. So we focused more of the conversation on what are the specific issues associated with Avenger Field that could perhaps be addressed. There were concerns expressed about the loud noise, about the distraction of the batting cage. There was a comment about, is there any possibility of rotating the field to where the foul balls don't end up in the tennis courts? So there was a lot of focus there, but I think probably from a realistic standpoint, the question is, are there ways in which operationally things can be done to where the distraction can be mitigated to a degree? We had a pretty intense conversation about tournaments versus league play, and if somebody wants to wave their hand and correct me when I'm done with summarizing this, please do. But what I heard in the notes I was taking is that the tournaments would be a challenge. There was a brief comment that you would probably need twice as many courts. You know, given the constraints and the footprint that we have, it sounded like, at least from the back and forth banter, that realistically tournaments may be a stretch and that it may be a negative or an overreach, but that the focus on league play, particularly evening league play, was something that was doable within the footprint that we had with obvious improvements such as the lighting. We talked about parking, particularly the opportunity for the green space that apparently now is being used for dogs and neighbors to relieve their dogs. That might be an opportunity for a modest expansion of parking. There seemed to be some pretty healthy debate about whether the parking that was there, the 21 spaces, I think it is, Amanda, that are 20 spaces more or less, whether they are actually controlled by tennis or whether people are parking there that have nothing to do with tennis. And there were comments about perhaps there could be a program that allows, something as obvious as if there's a car parked there before 8 o'clock in the morning that obviously has nothing to do with tennis, putting a note on the car, taking some kind of action to be able to at least exercise better control over the parking that we do have, and that perhaps we could pick up another 10, 15, 20 spaces adjacent to that in the green space. It was a really nice comment about it could be pervious pavement. It doesn't have to be solid pavement, because anything that we do in this neighborhood, we know, or in any neighborhood in New Orleans, that expands impervious area inadvertently results in drainage issues. And then the clubhouse itself, there was a comment, well, we really have almost everything we need, but I think the general consensus is it is a bit, it's nice, it's modest, but at times it's an embarrassment because it isn't of the quality that we would hope for, and that a modest expansion could be appropriate, that could add a couple more amenities. Certainly the restroom issue came up. And it was an interesting idea that if in fact you were rebuilding the clubhouse, could it be built with a flat roof to where you could have an elevated viewing area? Because as of now, you can sit in the green space, but to have something where you can actually view multiple courts is difficult. Comment about there really isn't any shade is something as simple as just being able to put awnings in places to where on the hot summer days that you can get out of the blistering sun. And I think that was the gist of it. Anything else that I missed? No, I think that was it. Okay, thanks. Tracy's up.
Okay, so our group was challenged to think expansively, and although we know Avenger Field's a non-starter, we decided to ignore that and think about what would be the possibilities if the park could acquire that or reuse it. And the group thought that the community, the tennis community, could easily support 6 to 10 more courts without a problem if there were a place to put them. We talked about what it would be like if there were another set of courts put somewhere else in the park, and the thinking was that the sort of nucleus of having the courts all there together was in a very effective way. So the consensus among the group was get rid of the baseball, put in more tennis courts. Of course, that brought up a discussion about what about the parking, what to do with the parking, and I think no matter how much we talk about making the tennis complex larger, we're always going to have to deal with that issue. So we discussed ideas about how to deal with that, looking at a piece of property that's owned by the Public Belt Railroad, but is just across the fence from Avenger Field. Could that be acquired and turned into parking somehow? We even talked about what would happen if we did a second level and put tennis courts on top of that, and had a couple of levels of parking and then tennis courts on top of that as a way to possibly expand. A lot of the people in the group, and Mike has already given us sort of some of his big ideas just to lead things off here, but a lot of people talked about other facilities they visited that had not just an elevated deck, but a whole observation area so that people could walk around during league play or during tournaments and observe several different matches going on at the same time. That was something that resonated. Kind of circling back down and getting a little closer to reality, we looked pretty closely at the way the courts are laid out now and thought that just maybe by edging them out, keeping the quantity the same, but just sort of expanding out closer to Tchoupitoulas and closer to Avenger Field and widening that green space in the center there would give an opportunity for people to gather and take breaks and have a place to sit and eat and maybe some shade, maybe even observation area there. And then, of course, along with the 6 or 10 more tennis courts, there would have to be a much larger clubhouse and facilities to go along with it. So a lot of good ideas, some out-of-the-box thinking, but also some very realistic thinking came from the group. People were understanding of wanting to make sure that the trees were preserved, the nice oak trees that are being parked under now. And so trying to find that balance between expansion and maintaining the amenities and the good points about what were there kind of led the discussion. Mike, Tiki, Lee, anything to add? Rebecca?
Possibly changing the entrance of, like, having the park in towards the trees. And somebody had mentioned moving the clubhouse by the trees and then eliminating the clubhouse in the middle of the facility. You could have more courts there. And if you came from the trees, people could hang out under the trees as shade. I mean, that would be a nice, it could be very beautiful.
Thank you for reminding me of that. That was a good idea that came out. But almost everything that was suggested was in the interest of increasing the number of courts. So it seems to be partly about capacity, and we also touched on the lighting idea about that would be a way to increase capacity by increasing the available hours that the courts are open. Mike or anyone else, anything from our group that I mentioned, that I missed?
We didn't even talk about lighting over there, but I think it was decided, like, it was assumed that would happen, by the way. On the big picture, like, we would have lighting, we would have longer hours. Ryan said, if they would have been exposed to Chris, then, people could play before they go. We're talking big picture, Chris. Ryan said it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think with lighting, the dots speak for themselves, do they not? Okay, for us, I'm going to let Rebecca wrap up, but thank you. It's been very, very informative. Just to let you know, the next step for us is to continue to solicit input, and I can't emphasize enough your friends, your neighbors, the folks in the different neighborhood groups. Please have them. I know it's tough, particularly on the weather's a little bit uncomfortable. Please have them weigh in by through the website and share ideas, new thoughts, or just building consensus around the things that we're seeing. The next steps for us, for the consultant team, is to be able to take a closer look at the ideas and begin thinking about what the issues are associated with implementing them. So any of you, including Mike and anybody else that has specific ideas, suggestions, whatever, what we're looking at is then what would it take to make this real and to share that information with the Audubon Institute. So Rebecca?
Well, Mark summed it up, so I will just say thank you. Thank you for coming. Your input is valuable. It's needed. We are here to listen, and we've heard some really great feedback over the last 2 meetings. Like Mark said, we'll continue to solicit input from all of you, from stakeholders. The website will remain open so you can provide comments. I anticipate a question about timing. Unfortunately, I can't give you a firm timeline, because the next step for us is to take back what we've learned in these meetings and through the comments online, bring them to the committee of the commission and the institute that's looking at this, give them feedback about what we heard, and then we will we will be challenging our designers to come up with something that creates this vision, your vision, frankly, because without your participation, we wouldn't know that nobody wants to keep the clay courts. It's weird. So we're going to Thanks, Steve. We're going to take that back, turn it into a vision that will be presented to the leadership of Audubon, and then we'll keep you informed. All right? Thank you again for coming.